On this episode of WarDocs, we're joined by retired Navy Master Chief and Independent Duty Corpsman Joe Espinosa. Joe shares his extensive experiences in military medicine, discussing his journey from a young corpsman to a leader in healthcare technology. He reflects on the lessons learned from operational medicine, the impact of 9/11 on his career, and the challenges of establishing medical departments on new ships. Joe emphasizes the importance of innovation in military healthcare, the role of technology, and about his transition from active duty to his new role with T6 Health Systems, where he is focusing on improving the survivability of severely injured and critically ill patients by empowering frontline medical responders with real-time, data-driven clinical intelligence. For further information about Master Chief Espinosa and our previous guests, visit our website at wardocspodcast.com. Be sure to follow WarDocs on your preferred podcast platform and subscribe to our WarDocs YouTube channel. I'm your host, Dr. Doug Soderdahl, retired Army urologist.
Welcome to WarDocs, the military medicine podcast. This show brings you a first-hand, behind-the-scenes look into the mission, unique opportunities, and deployed experiences of the entire military healthcare team. From state-of-the-art hospitals in the United States to the most austere environments across the globe, WarDocs has you covered.
Today, we're privileged to welcome retired Navy Master Chief Hospital Corpsman Joe Espinosa to WarDocs. Joe, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Doug, thanks for having me, man. I'm really excited about our conversation today.
Well, you had quite the career in the Navy, and you served as a hospital corpsman with the 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, and deployed with the 13th Marine Expeditionary Unit. What did that foundational experience in austere expeditionary environment teach you about operational medicine, and what specific lessons stand out to you from that time?
When I think back to that time, Doug, and I try to tell people this and kind of help them explain, that was pre 9/11 time. And I think that it was it was just a different environment at that point. I think that, when I originally joined the service in 95, we were well outside of, first Gulf War era. And, we were still kind of trying to, keep up the Marine Corps, Navy Marine Corps, amphibious roots. So I think that coming from the Naval Hospital, that's where I was at prior to be with the Marine Corps, and working in emergency room, and that experience that I had there, and then showing up to 1st Marine Division, Blue Diamond was a very unique experience from what I had previously. There was so much kind of real kind of trust and confidence in what I felt was a very young corpsman with, a little bit of training and a little bit of experience. But what I felt at the time was not commensurate with the amount of responsibility that they kind of gave us. And then once I got out there to the battalion and truly started to kind of engulf myself with the Marines and started to learn kind of that culture and how different that was, but also from a medicine perspective, my RIDC, and I'll never forget him, HM Kenny Kirk, he just really spent so much time trying to teach us as much as he possibly could, knowing that at some point we were going to deploy and I was going to end up with 40 Marines and myself, well outside of the reach of, hey, I need help. Can somebody, come out here and take a look at this guy with me? And so I think what I really learned is that you have to truly kind of take that responsibility of, being someone who is going to be out there that far away from the aid station and trying to be best prepared for, taking care of anything that, that came. And, we deployed that very first deployment. And, I remember getting off the ship, going into to Kuwaiti Harbor. And I just remember this sense of it was almost excitement, and at the same time, just fear of that. Wow, this is real. We're about to go into this austere environment. And I remember them taking us out into the middle of the desert, very, very late at night, into the darkness, and realizing that, okay, this is it. Like I'm really about to go out here and take care of these guys. So it taught me a lot about doing your best to be prepared for really what was the unknown.
So it sounds like that IDC was a big role model for you, and you eventually became an independent duty corpsman, which really requires a unique blend of clinical confidence and personal humility because sometimes you're the sole provider, whether you're deployed in the middle of the desert or on a ship. How do you cultivate that balance as an IDC?
As an IDC, I think that one of the things that, again, as I was going through school and then later on, my first couple of tours as an IDC, I think that I always, it very similar to being a junior corpsman now, just that, they give me a little bit more training, but really understanding that, I have a certain level of knowledge, but definitely nowhere in the vicinity of being a physician, and that I had to continue to try and develop those skills, those my both my clinical skills as a provider, far from home, but then also realizing that there is a certain level of, we can't teach you everything in school. It's actually impossible for us to teach you everything that you need to know to be successful out there. So I think one of the things that school also taught me, anyways, and I tried to pass that on to others after, was you have to almost truly hone the skill of being a problem solver, right? To be a self-taught problem solver who says, okay, this is a situation that they did not teach us in school. I have some skills and some tools, and now I need to try and figure out, how to deal with this particular, whether it's a clinical problem or even things as it sounds like it wouldn't be something that you would expect our healthcare providers have to deal with, but even things like you know uh, water testing on the ship, and dealing with foodborne illnesses, and just lots of different things that again I school taught us, but I just never really envisioned that it was going to be something I was going to see a lot, and we did.
It's amazing to reflect that it was 24 years ago that 9/11 happened. What was your 9/11 story, and how did that change the trajectory of your career?
So I was with First Marine Regiment, so still part of Blue Diamond First Marines, and I had gone over to the regimental aid station to work my last about year of time, because I already had orders to IDC school I had applied to, and was was just waiting for my class to start, and then one day we're coming into the aid station, and I remember our senior chief, Mick Ruiz was his name, and Mick was a guy. As a matter of fact, Mick used to tell us the stories about, because he was a Desert Storm sailor, and I remember him telling us the stories about that night before they invaded, and then here we are now, thrusting. Thinking about his stories then, and be like, oh, this is, we missed all of that stuff, right? That stuff's not going to happen for us. And then um, that day, I remember that morning, he had an office down at the very end of the passageway, and he had a little lounge with a TV on it, and I remember him yelling down the passageway, "You guys get in here right now." So there's a small number of us, maybe 10, 12 corpsmen, so we all go down there, not knowing what was happening. And I just remember him standing there in front of the TV, and we're watching just all the events unfold of 9/11. And I'll never forget, Doug. I'll never forget. I mean, just the look in his eye. He turned around to all of us, and he tells us, he says, "Hey, I just want you guys to start thinking right now." He says, if we've got a pack, and we've got to get out of here, it, like what are we taking? Where are we going? Like, all, and none of it obviously never unfolded for us right there. But he was already trying to drive into us, is that, you guys, this is us. They're about to call us into the fight, and we need to be prepared to go. And I think that idea, that concept of, that he took his experience that he had from living through, the first Gulf War, and he was trying to kind of drive that experience into us, and hopefully lead us to realize that, this is now our time to do those things. So I think that trajectory for me, where that really started to unfold for me, is that as I started showing up to my first ship as now an IDC, and then later on when I was on Macon Island, it was something that I always tried to kind of inject into the corpsmen and the officers as well, of to take my experiences and to kind of help them understand that, hey, I know you guys don't have this level of experience or things that you have come through in this time, but we're together gonna, get prepared, and we're gonna be successful together. And I'm gonna help you guys to see where we potentially may be asked to go. And so, yeah, definitely just one of those moments that I feel like, definitely a foundational moment for me where, I realized that this can get very serious very quickly.
Right. You know your life is going to change. It's going to be different from what you envisioned a week before that happened. One of the things that is interesting from your bio is that you had this unique opportunity to be a plank owner on not just one new construction ship, but two, the USS Green Bay and the USS Stockdale. What would you say were the most significant challenges in establishing a medical department from scratch? And what did you really learn about the intersection of logistics and medical readiness and all of the things that go into setting that up?
I think new construction is definitely, it's such a unique experience for sailors. And as we you know initially, again, I was part of the Green Bay crew, and Green Bay was a unique experience alone because Green Bay was one of the ships that really had some challenges, because where she was getting built was down in Avondale, Louisiana, right in the same time period as Hurricane Katrina. And so that unique experience of sailors who think that they're on a certain trajectory, and hey, we're kind of, we're making all the preparations to go down there and truly, set that ship up for the future. And then these events happen that start to drastically alter that course, and trying to keep sailors motivated for, hey, you guys, I know that things aren't panning out the way that we thought they were. And you know maybe not necessarily the schedule, but trying to continue their motivation into that this work is still important, because this is what the Navy has asked of us now. Later on, as I transition from Green Bay onto Stockdale, I think that, again, another level of unique experience, Doug, where um, as we started to set up that medical department, myself and my two junior corpsmen, really understanding that it was easy to, hey, let me find, the ship that was before me, and kind of how had they done some things, but then also trying to figure out, okay, this was the way that they solved the problem of, setting up the medical department, how they set up their, medical supplies, and then saying to myself, hey, the three of us together, we're good. We have an opportunity here to improve on what somebody has done before, us. And so, trying to look at every single individual process and say, hey, this was good. Is it still good? Is it still the way that we want to do things? Or is there something that we could, improve upon and make it better, so that way, again, we can hand it to the next crew slightly better? I think that as those things started to evolve, then, and here, this was definitely a unique experience for me, because I had gotten underway on some smaller ships. But now, as you're opening up storerooms and you're trying to figure out how I'm going to cram all of this medical supply into these teeny tiny storerooms, really starting to try and ask ourselves is that, hey, what is the best use of what is really a limited, probably one of the most limiting factors on board a small vessel like that? And it's just storage
Space.
space. Yeah. When you're thinking about going for, and in this, our initial voyage, we were only, out to sea for roughly about, 6-8 weeks, from what I can remember, but realizing that at some point we're going to take the ship to sea for, 6 to 7 months. And you're going to have to figure out what is your best use of the limited amount of space you have. And that really makes you kind of rethink about, medical logistics, and how you make some of those decisions on what you order and what you store, versus when, even when I was with the Marine Corps, we had a lot more storage capacity for, taking things. And definitely, my experience at a naval hospital as a very young corpsman, I thought the Keebler elves brought that stuff in the middle of the night. We had no idea where the medical supplies were coming from. We just show up the next morning, and all the stuff will be restocked. So I think it gives you a unique perspective when I call it, when you're an owner operator. If the medical logistics was later on a problem, I had nobody to be upset with but myself. And it gives you a different perspective of the things you choose.
And I think that people don't really have that perspective of what it's like in military medicine to have that constraint of, you know, doctors, healthcare professionals are used to really having unlimited supply and get whatever they want, when they want it, where they want it. But when you have to decide, hey, if we take this, it means we don't take this. That's another level of you know confusion sometimes, but it certainly makes those decisions more complicated. And it's a great experience to kind of have, because you learn how to prioritize and deal with things that, hey, we had this back home, but guess what? We don't have it here. Figure it out, MacGyver. So as you progress to in rank to Force Medical Master Chief, your responsibilities kind of shifted from the more tactical direct care to operational strategic fleet-wide leadership. How did your experience on the front lines before that inform your approach to advising senior leaders, shaping the future of kind of the next generation of the hospital corps and corpsman community?
I was in a unique position when I got selected for just promotion to Master Chief, and I got called up by back then it was Master Chief AJ Davis. He was who was the Service Forces Pacific Master Chief at the time, and so he gives me a call and he says, hey, can you come? I'd like to have just have a conversation with you. I had just come home from deployment. And so we come up, and I didn't realize that this was kind of first level of interview for this job to replace him. And so he was kind of asking me some of these questions about hey, talk to me about some of your challenges. How'd your deployment go? What were some of the things that you kind of foreseen as possible problems, but then what were some of the challenges that you didn't foresee, and how did you deal with them? And as I was kind of talking to him, and I just remember rambling in that conversation with him about telling him kind of a lot of the problems that I've seen, and a lot of things that I told him that hey, here's where I think that you guys up here at the type commander level, can help us. Because again, at that point, I thought I was still going to, stay on the hull I still had about a year left of my tour. And so I was basically telling him, hey, here's all the places where I think you can help me to be better out there, not realizing what I was really making with my own to-do list. And so I think that unique, very recent time of, not just being on the ship, but being deployed, definitely set me up for walking into that job with the idea of those guys down on the piers now are the people who I have a responsibility to, right? Is that to do everything I possibly can to improve their ability to take care of their crews. And how do I look at those things? So when I started the job and I started kind of diving into just the daily grind of that job, and then as we started looking at the different medical logistics and how we were going to affect the consumables and the equipment that were on the ship. And then I think that was probably the real first place, because I had always kind of considered myself a person who kind of liked to take a very long view of the things that were coming up. Hey, I showed up to make an island. I knew we were going to deploy in roughly in about 18 months. And I was talking to my sailors about, hey, you guys, we only have 18 months left before we got to deploy. We got a lot of stuff to do and very little bit of time to do it in. But then when I got to the TICOM level and I started to truly learn like how far forward you probably could lean into making changes. And I tell these people all the time, Doug, I learned this number very quickly because one of the civilians taught this to me. 540 days. 540 days is the amount of time, at least back then, that if you want to get a repair done, a scheduled repair done to the medical department, you have to have planned it 540 days into the future so that it can make the maintenance availability. So that way it can get programmed, paid for, scheduled, and everything can get set up. And if you're not thinking that 540 days into the future, at the very least, you're gonna miss it. You're trying to be reactionary, and I think it is such a hard concept to teach people when they haven't had to experience. Hey, you came to me a year out with something that was hey, this wasn't an unexpected repair. You knew kind of you needed to do this, and trying to teach that to the guys on the waterfront that I need you guys to look farther out so I can help you get the things you need. But you guys got to help me, because if I don't know you got a problem, I can't help you guys fix it. So, definitely a unique experience there as well.
Your final role in uniform was an expeditionary medical systems requirement manager at the Pentagon. What did that role entail, and how did it provide a capstone for your career, kind of going from, meeting the end user needs to now figuring out what the end users are going to require in the future.
What an amazing end of a career, Doug. It really was. And I'll be honest with you, I did not truly understand that job when I told now he's the Deputy Surgeon General of the Navy, Admiral Friedman. When I told him, yeah, absolutely, I would love to come work with you guys. And as him and I were having the conversation during my interview, to come work for him, and he was explaining to me what they did there. First off, I had no idea that this existed. And so as he's explained to me what they do, and then I started to get excited about, again, because I could see the potential for, not necessarily, what I personally could do, but with the job itself, what that office has the ability to do. And thinking that I had a unique opportunity to show really the boss, how important it is to have, that enlisted voice there inside that office. At the time, they had a great team there, an amazing team they really were doing some phenomenal work with building new requirements for what later has become the expeditionary medicine family of systems. But I think the one of the skills that they didn't have a ton of was specifically surface IDC. But I think that the experience that they had just of shipboard medical requirements was they had a few folks there that had done some minimal deployment time, but and Dr. Daniels, Captain Daryl Daniels, what an amazing surgeon he was to work for. He had spent some time with their fleet, and he had been a surgeon on board a couple of vessels, but he was at that point really the one who had that kind of relevant experience with shipboard medicine. And so then they brought me in, and I think that my unique experiences over the course of being an IDC up to that point, boy, I've been an IDC over 20 years at that point. And coming in there, I think just kind of it I feel like I filled out the team, where my experience, became, definitely helpful as we started talking about, not just the expedition medical family systems, but even as we started, looking at shipboard requirements for future hospital ship program, what later become, or what later now has become expedition medical ship program. Because, and Doug, I'm gonna call myself the words I use a lot. I'm kind of a ship nerd. I spent a ton of time, writing ships, which is it's a little bit unique for corpsmen. We don't traditionally do a whole lot of shipboard tours. And, I've had the good fortune to spend, the bulk of my IDC time truly, with the fleet.
So often the transition from the military to the civilian world is challenging. And you've been wearing a uniform for most of your adult life. You're a self professed ship nerd. What was the most difficult aspect of your personal transition? And what advice would you give to other senior enlisted leaders or other leaders that are preparing to step into a new career?
I think I think one of the areas where I had a hard time, especially as I was kind of getting closer and closer to retirement, was in uh, seeing the possibilities of areas where I could seek a post military career. I think a lot of my peers, not just the IDCs, but just hospital corpsmen, and then just the senior enlisted in general. I think that we have a very most of us have a very narrow kind of focus area. It's again we go looking for work that is where our expertise and our experience is. And so because of that fact, I think that we don't take a much more broad approach at the type of whether it's industries or different sectors that you could look for you know new career possibilities. And I think that for myself personally, I look at a lot of my friends that they were finding jobs in hey, whether it was healthcare managers at clinics and healthcare facilities, and just across the spectrum of healthcare, because again it's where a lot of our experience is. And even when I look at guys like retired Force Master Chief Terry Prince, who's doing some amazing things working for the VA. I think it's those are all great places for us to find work, post career. But I think that there are lots of other places, maybe what I would probably deem the not traditional pathway for guys who have done our types of jobs, in the Navy, to find work across the industry. So I think the advice that I give to people, and I love telling people my story, my personal story, but I think with the advice that I would give to people that are getting ready for transition is that to have an open mind and to cast your net wide for the type of work that you are looking for, because I think that you would be surprised at how many other areas, certain sectors, would benefit from our experience, even if it's not a direct translation. But it's some of those skills that we build, wearing a uniform, taking operational units, over the horizon. And I think it's those leadership skills, those problem solving skills, the way that we look at things, that I think that is something that is extremely valued in a lot of industries. And we're the ones who don't necessarily go, kind of put ourselves out there for those types of jobs. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing, that another one that I had a lot of anxiety about, was that 30 years of wearing a uniform, the thing that I think that I miss the most is that true connection to people. I think that when you wear a uniform and you do the work that we do, you have a tendency to build a very strong bond with the people you work with. And I have had lots of people who have told me, civilians, who have told me that it's not always as common as they have seen in the military. And so it was one of the things that I definitely worried quite a bit about, was, that I'm going to miss the people. I'm going to miss, having sailors and the bonds that you build with, the people that you work with. But I think that one of the things that I've tried to do in my new job is that I've tried to kind of bring that idea to them, instead of saying, well, it's just different, and I'm never going to have that bond again with people. I think it's something that we also can bring to the workforce. And again, if you find a great company, and you find some great people, it starts to feel a whole lot like home.
So you moved, from your military career of defining and solving problems for the government to now managing a product that solves problems that, maybe up to four have not been solved. So what specific unsolved problems or concerns did you see in military medicine that drew you to work in your new role with T6 Health Systems?
So I think that a lot of the time that I spent utilizing the legacy system, the one that T6 Health System is building the software to hopefully replace that capability for, and again, it's not just the Navy, it's for, this is a joint services product that's going to go across, potentially all of the services, and be the legacy system, just like the old system was for us. I mean, we used TMIP, the old system, for, boy, at least my entire time as an independent duty corpsman. TMIP was rolled out right as I was checking into the Stockdale. Right, I remember them coming to my ship to do that first initial install. So as I think about that system and what was happening there, and then I think about now what we're doing, with OpMed CDP and the rest of the JOMAS products. Whenever I get an opportunity to talk to sailors, or any of the folks that are going to use this, the guys that are still wearing uniforms, I think that I try to tell them all the time. I says, you guys have a unique opportunity right now to truly look at how you have used the old system, and say to yourselves, if I could go backwards in time to when those software engineers were developing that software, probably 25 plus years ago, and you could tell them all the things that you wish the system could do, what would you tell them? What would you have told them about TMIP? That, boy, you guys, if you could just get it to do this for us, that would be amazing. And what I tell the guys is this: that's where you're standing right now. You're standing in that exact place. You have an opportunity to help us shape a system that potentially is going to get used for the next 25 years. There are potentially sailors that are not even alive today that are going to use the system that we're working on right now. And I think that perspective helps them to truly see what a unique opportunity they have to help us shape the future. Some of the things that we're going to solve for the future is, the things that have been, kind of these pain points for us, over the course of time. And I'll just, as one example, one of the issues that we have always had with TMIP is I call it message in a bottle. It's always been a one-way communication system, right? I send information, and when I'm out there on my ship and I'm putting things, healthcare information into the system, and it, eventually leaves the ship, and goes to the shore side. I don't receive any feedback whatsoever that they received my message, or that one of my sailors goes to shore and they get seen, over there. I don't get any ping back, of update information from them. It's bi-directional, transfer of information. The new systems are going to solve that problem for us. So that way, again, information will flow in both directions, and we're going to give those, medical departments a much better experience, with, even just a small item like that, that bi-directional, communication.
The T6 OpMed Care Delivery Platform is really designed for the Role 1 and 2, more austere medical treatment facilities. And I remember my time at a Role 3, sometimes the best information we got was just a black Sharpie something was written on the bandages from the X-lap that they had, and it said, "This is what happened." And, that was about the strength of the communications. So what other critical gaps in deployed military healthcare does this new platform really want to address and solve, and keep us from keeping the black Sharpie market super strong in the next conflict?
Oh, yeah, and that is such a great example, Doug, of one of the, I think, kind of focal points that all of the systems are trying to go after. From a CDP perspective, one of the things that we talk about is, one, if you don't make it easy for the users, right, the healthcare providers to use, they're just going to go back to Sharpies on tape and paper and whatever other handwritten documents they can, because the system has to make their job more efficient and effective, and not be a burden. Because everybody is always going to say, hey, we got to document the best health care we can, because all of those things are important, and we 100% agree. But it has to, if it's not easy for them to use, they're just going to uh, revert back to what they know. And so I think that one of the things that we've tried to do is to truly make the system intuitive, user friendly, and really make them efficient at documenting care, because the more efficient we make them, the more likely they are to just continue to use the system. I think one of the other things that as I started to learn about the products, and really kind of look at what CDP was doing, is a lot of what you described as well, which is essentially, when you are working in a disconnected environment. So whether that is, self-imposed, and we just don't have enough communications in order for us to transmit, healthcare data, to the next echelon of care. You at the Role 3, I'm on a Role 1, and you're at some point going to end up with my patient, but I may not have connectivity. And again, like, I don't know if you've ever been on a ship, but boy, buddy, our internet is, because again, it's dedicated to the things that you absolutely got to have. So there are systems that maybe don't get the bandwidth allocated to it that we would need for, transmitting healthcare information. So the fact that we have a system in place that allows us to transfer information between uh, devices, that requires no connectivity whatsoever. And I don't know if you've ever seen these. So they're called animated QR codes. And so what it basically does is, as I'm trying to generate the information that I need to transfer this patient to the next role of care, and my in-route care team shows up on my flight deck to pick up my patient, even if we have zero connectivity whatsoever, I can tell my device, hey, share with a CDP device, and it starts to generate QR codes, a series of them, 1, 2, 30, whatever the number is based on the amount of information you have. Then the other device scans those QR codes. It ingests all of that healthcare information. And then when that in-route care team takes off with my patient, they took the care data with them, and I didn't have to actually transmit anything. Then when they arrive at your Role 3, the exact same process happens. From their device, they generate those animated QR codes. It gets transferred to the Role 3, and at no point in that entire scenario were any of these systems actually connected via the system we hope uh, will work. Is again when we have good connectivity and all of those, healthcare information can pass through the system. It makes it easy because you at the roll three, you can see my patient before they necessarily have even arrived. But this gives us the ability to do that exact same function in a totally disconnected environment. And I think that is another feature that is going to solve some huge problems for us in the future. As we look at the next big conflict.
Now, I'm old enough, and I'm sure you're probably old enough to remember all the patient, care data was written down on my pen to the paper, and then we went through CHCS, and then we
Oh yeah.
transitioned to Alta, and then hey, now it's MHS Genesis. So how does this new platform fit in with the latest and greatest Genesis? Is it a complementary tool? Is it completely different function? How do those interact?
So absolutely a complementary tour, and it's one of the things that we look at, a lot as far as from the program perspective and the software development perspective is that so we know this, right? This is an important factor. While it may not have been the primary goal, eventually you want every piece of healthcare information to end up in the garrison record, Genesis, right? And so as the software was being developed, very, very deliberate actions and continued testing, evaluation, and modification of the systems in order to continuously improve how much information out of CDP ends up in the Genesis record, and that it ends up in the correct places. So that way, in the short term, those healthcare teams and the short facilities at, Naval Medical Center San Diego and at BAMC in San Antonio and Walter Reed here in the DC area. But as those patients retrograde back to the states, those care teams can also see all the way down to the point of injury. All the care that was delivered to them over the course of their episode of care. But also now being a retired veteran, at the end of service time, that you also I want, all of my healthcare information, to be available. So that way, the VA has it, so they can see all the care that was delivered and the injuries that happened. And, hey, yeah, absolutely. These are service connected, injuries and how that all fits into, how we push information into the system so that way again it's there for really the all the different aspects of where that information gets assessed, evaluated, utilized, not just delivering care but for you know the way that the VA system uses it as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, when I retired, I was going back into, the 80s and 90s and trying to find carbon copies and, copies of copies of copies that you could barely read
Yeah.
anything to say, "Hey, yeah, I had this condition way back when." And they go, "We can't even read this." It would be great to have that. One of the other things I want to talk about is that I know that this kind of technology could be used in EMS and outside the hospital care, out of hospital care. But in the military, you've got some unique cybersecurity. You're maybe treating a patient in a striker vehicle that's getting ambushed, or a helicopter that's getting shot at. What are the unique requirements for developing technology? You want this stuff to last, and how does that impact how does that reality inform the design of these products that are, tried out with the military?
From a T6 perspective and the way that we look at how we've developed the software, I think that to your point, right, is that you want to develop software that gives the services, the users, the all the folks that are coming up with the programmatic requirements of what hardware can we use in order to support the software that the vendors like T6 are developing, is that you want to give them all of the functionality that they need and at the same time try and balance this against the system requirements of the software, so that way you don't create resource requirement of the software that is so heavy that it forces the services into maybe a hardware solution that does not meet their particular operational need. So I think one of the things that we work through as a software development company is that, again, how do we find the sweet spot? Right? How do you increase and improve as much functionality as you possibly can, and at the same time be efficient with your resource requirements? So that way, whether you are, again, hey, a young corpsman or medic, inside of an armored vehicle, and all they can bring with them is the smallest of devices. It needs to be durable and rugged enough to operate in that environment. But again, same thing. You don't want this poor sailor or medic to be having to tote around something that is so cumbersome that again, just like we talked about before, if it's too hard for them to use or carry, it's going to get left behind, because again, I've got to sacrifice what that device is going to give me, because I need to bring more medical supplies. And that's you don't want them to have to make those types of choices. So
One of the hot topics now is the integration of mobile technology. Everything's mobile. We've got wearables that are collecting all kinds of data on patients and soldiers. We've got AI exploding in how it impacts healthcare. How do you see real-time data capture and these synthesis tools bridging the gap between where we are now and what we need, both in the military sector, but also civilian healthcare practices?
Doug, I think that there is so much work that is getting done in so many places, and I think that everybody's very excited right now about kind of, again, these emerging technologies, right? Just the AI as one example of how could you utilize and where could you utilize the artificial intelligence, the large language models, and all of the different systems to support healthcare providers and what they have to do. And I think that, one, from an OpMed CDP perspective, we already have a lot of clinical decision support that is built to the system, right? And it's not there to replace good clinical decision making. It's there to inform it, right? To support their cognitive burden, so that way, again, we can take some of those functions off of their plate, so that way, again, they can deliver more care to more people at their time of need. And so as we look at how to improve the way that the clinical decision support works inside the software, I think that there are lots of future applications, especially as the AI technology continues to improve. And one of the things that I find very interesting is that as you have the companies like OpenAI, and they're developing these offline versions of their products, ChatGPT, in an offline mode. The future applications for items like that, if you did nothing more than had some medical references that uh, the chatbot had access to, and it's providing you some just general recommendations. Now, here's where a product like CDP in a small device, because as we use structured data, right? So instead of again, just like you and I back in the day when most of it was just free text, whether it was into CHCS or into those free text boxes in the original Alta templates. But as we continue to use more structured data, its ability to look at that structured data, apply AI technology, cross-reference it across different algorithms, the clinical decision support, and truly help the providers with some best recommendation of hey, you may want to consider the following. And I think that in one of the ideas that we talk about is the ability for the system to support a young junior corpsman who may not, again, 14 weeks of training is what you receive when you're coming out of A school, and we ask those sailors to do some amazing things. And if we can provide them with just a little bit of assistance, one, to just give them maybe confidence in what they were already thinking about, but now the the software helps them to confirm what they believed to be true, And now that's just enough of a confidence boost to say, yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Or in some cases, to show them maybe something that they couldn't see because maybe it was just obscure enough that they couldn't recognize the pattern. This is where I think AI does a great job of those obscure patterns and recognizing it for them and saying, hey, you may want to consider this. And so I think that these are all, future uses that I think is going to continue to develop, and it's only going to get better. I think that it's going to accelerate, Doug. I really believe this. As much as I am, watching and trying to kind of keep up as much as I possibly can. I think it's just going to accelerate. We're
Yeah.
getting faster and faster.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, I think there is some hesitation of, boy, would I ever just listen to a machine telling me what to do? But we see examples of it already with, an AED. It says shock is advised. And what do? We press the button. We don't say, well, hey, let me analyze all of these rhythms. And yeah, we do that, but we're trusting that machine. And so it's very interesting that, yeah, I see that as the next augment for that 14-week trained person that can say, hey, I'm thinking this, but the machine is also saying, go with your gut and do it. Beyond individual patient care, how does the T6 Health platform contribute to the broader force health readiness, and maybe tracking pre-deployment screenings, long-term rehab? How does it interact with other information that's out there that's pertinent to that patient care?
This is another area where we're continuing to develop and improve the system. And I think one area where it's not doing as much today, but this is absolutely an area where we're investing in is that medical logistics. And how does medical logistics, both from a, hey, I know I need the ability to track what I have on board the ship or in the unit in my AMOLs, wherever I've got my medical supplies, but then to truly make that connection between what I am using in the delivery of care, what I currently have on the shelves, and then another area where I think that the software is gonna support us is that to whether auto decrement, hey, I put in a chest tube in this patient, and the system sees that I documented that healthcare, and it goes to the supply side and it says, hey, decrease down one, decrease down two, and again it's decrementing what I'm utilizing in how I document care. I don't think that is something that we have ever had at our disposal in the past, definitely from a military software perspective in the old legacy systems. And I think that that's an amazing place where we can drastically improve it, because Doug, here's what I really believe is that in the future, that data stream, right, from collecting this structured data of the injuries that is happening, as it is collected and analyzed, you can then start to inform on the shore side, new construction vessels. Hey, we've looked at the data over the course of time because of here's what's going into CDP, and we think that, hey, we may need to increase the number of one particular item that are on board the shelf. And based on the data, we also see that this particular item hasn't been used in the last 15 deployments. And we should probably consider whether or not this is an item that we want to consume space when it very rarely gets used. And I think that's going to drastically improve. And then I think that the next jump, Doug, is going to be predictive logistics, right? And I think that lots of people are also, especially from my last job there at OpNav, because N4L4, as a medical code, medical expeditionary medicine, we're nested inside of the four, right? Our boss was, the deputy chief of naval operations for logistics and installations, right? He lives in a logistics world. And so as a staff, we were constantly talking about, hey, how do we anticipate the needs of the fleet? So that way we're sending things that they need before they've realized that they need them. And I think that that's going to be the next iteration of where a lot of this goes is using predictive logistics to try and figure out, hey, where Where do we need to have things ready to go, and truly to come up with a much more informed logistics package to send out to a ships. Again, if you think about any particular scenario, hey, missile strike on a destroyer, we know these things today. We have a pretty good idea of, just based on historical data, that if a missile hits the side of a destroyer, it has a high probability of generating X number of casualties in X variety of injury patterns. Well, the data also tells us what particular supplies and equipment you would need to take care of those uh, patients. So all of this is only going to continue to improve the more data that we can collect through software applications like CDP.
So your military career involved training the next generation of independent duty corpsmen, leading teams. How do you use those same training principles and leadership tenets that you used in the military now when you're in a new role leading a team in healthcare technology?
Boy, Doug, that's another tough question for me, because I think that I am so recently retired from the military that I'm still trying to figure that out myself. And I do ask myself this question a lot: of where do I find a place in my new role, and now working as a civilian, so that way I can bring that 30 years of experience of leading teams, building teams, working through these complex problems, and how do I take those skills that I have and add to the team that is already there. Our amazing team at T6, very similar to when I joined the team at N4L4. I just want to be part of the solution to improve what we're already doing, not drastically change what anybody is doing. And that's where I feel like that experience that I do have can maybe help to just add to the overall goal. So I'm still trying to figure it out, though. To a very long answer to your question, I am still trying to figure that out every day.
Looking to the future, what are the most pressing challenges or opportunities in military healthcare do you and your team at T6 see that is within their scope or wheelhouse that they could address?
One of the areas that that we talk a lot about is that, and we were talking earlier about again trying to balance adding things into the system in order to improve the functions that are available to the end users, and at the same time not making the software so resource intensive that it makes the material solution much harder. Again, what type of devices. But I think that in that same concept is the more I think that we as a company try to meet every single user's desire for hey, I really want to be able to document this, document that, and you're when you try to meet the goals of every single possible scenario, I think sometimes what can happen to you is that when you try to be all things to all people, you don't become great at what you're really a focus area. And so again, I think that's another balance point, right? So I think that us as a system for T6, I think that trying to balance that sweet spot between all things to all people and giving enough functionality that uh, you really can give them something to use and it's going to meet the majority of the use cases, I think is one of the places where we do have kind of a lot of influence into how the software continues to develop. It is a commercial product, so we have a lot of stake in ensuring that the product that we deliver to the services is the absolute best product we possibly can provide for them. And I think that's I know that just from listening to the leadership of the company, like this is something that they absolutely push all of us to do is again how do we provide the absolute best we possibly can for them.
What are the end users' feedback saying? What are they saying about the product? How is it working?
This is my favorite part of my job. It really is. I absolutely love, and I've had some great opportunities just very recently to go out to a few locations. San Diego, California, spending some time with some sailors, out there. And the feedback that we have received has been absolutely amazing. In all the places that I've gone to this point. And I would say that the thing that I wish were getting different feedback from, and this is the one area where I know we've got to do a better job of, is that when I get out to places and I show people, CDP and what it can do for them, and the comment I absolutely hate hearing, Doug, is that, hey Joe, why haven't I heard more about this? Why is this the first time that we're kind of really, like, we hear about the stuff, we hear about Jomis and CDP and all the different products, but it's not very specific, and we haven't really seen uh, a lot of information about exactly what is coming. And then I show up, with devices, and I start showing people, and they're giving me amazing feedback on both ends. Hey Joe, this is great, but boy, we think it'd be a great idea if you guys could, add this, add that, some kind of user, level feedback. And this is absolutely the type of feedback that we're hunting for right now, because we know this is that, it's in agile software development. One of the things that you want to be able to do is that you want to be able to kind of iterate, software improvements in short sprints, right? So that way, again, you're continually providing value to the customer by making modifications, get it out there for users to take a look at, give us feedback. Hey, we'll take that back, and we'll continue to try and improve that, for you. And if we can truly operate in this manner of, test a little, learn a lot. And I think that in that concept, like, we'll continue to build a great product that will only get better. But we know this is that, hey, everybody is chasing a timeline that, hey, really on a moment's notice. I mean, again, we could end up at war tonight, heaven forbid, and nobody wants it. But we also have to understand that, if they had to go to war tonight, I need to be constantly working towards giving them the best solution we possibly can. And tomorrow morning, when we wake up and it hasn't happened again, we're going to keep on working, and I hope that, nobody ever has to, take our product to war. But if they do, we're going to give them the best product we possibly can.
So we may have some folks listening to this episode saying, man, this is the first I've heard of this. How in the world could I possibly learn more? How can they find out about, what's coming, and what are the solutions, and how could they provide feedback if they want to?
As the individual services are working through their, individual rollout plans, and that I know that the Jonas program of us has done some road shows, and some individual trainings that have gone out to different, I'll call them fleet concentration areas, even though I know that the other services don't call them that. I think that, one of the things that a service member can do is that when they hear about these things, we need everybody to go and participate, right? Because the more I can get uniform personnel, end users, sitting through, whether it's the training and then ultimately being part of an evaluation station, or a user level feedback session, or whatever it may be, when they see these things coming to a theater near them, we need them to show up, because that's the only way we're going to hear their voices and truly get those ideas. I'm a firm believer in this, Doug. Some of the best feedback we're going to get is going to become from some young, whether it's an independent duty corpsman or some young medic somewhere, because they're going to come up with use cases that we probably couldn't dream of, and they're gonna find the places for improvement, and that's what we need.
So when the history books are written 50, 100 years from now, how would you like your legacy in military medicine to be recorded?
That's a tough question. I think that what I will hope that, and I don't even necessarily know that I have any thought that I would ever end up in a history book. I'll tell you what would be a more uh, meaningful thing for me is that someday some young sailor will when they were a young sailor today and they're a master chief someday, will be standing around telling young sailors crazy stories about Joe Espinosa, and the things that I taught them were the things that I showed them that they could be, the possibilities. And if sailors are standing around, telling stories, and I tell stories about the old master chiefs, about, from my time, that's what I hope for. I hope that those guys will 30 years from now be telling stories about me and the crazy things that I used to tell them.
Well, we've been speaking with retired Navy Master Chief Joe Espinosa on WarDocs podcast. Joe, thanks again for sharing your experiences and insights with us, and thank you for your service to this nation.
Doug, thank you so much. This has been such a great experience, and I really appreciate an opportunity to come speak with you, and get some great dialogue going, and hopefully there's some young motivators out there that are excited about what the future holds for them, because I'm excited for them.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Joe.
Thanks. Have a great one.
Thank you for listening to WarDocs. We sure hope you enjoyed it. WarDocs is a nonprofit organization supported by donations from listeners like you. Please follow and subscribe to our show on whatever platform you consume your podcasts, and rate and review this episode, and share the show with your contacts on social media. Find out more information about our show, our guests, and how to become a member of Team WarDocs on WarDocsPodcast.com. Thank you for your support. If you like war stories and medical drama, WarDocs has you covered. Spread the word.